Now, this month marks 50 years since 21 people were killed and more than 200 injured following the Birmingham Pub Bombings of 1974.
A group of men who became known as the Birmingham Six were each sentenced to life in prison over the attacks, but were later released after having their convictions quashed.
Ahead of the anniversary, a new BBC podcast looks in more detail at Britain's biggest unsolved mass murder. Let's take a look.
November the 21st, 1974. A night like any other in the heart of an English city. Until...
There's a bomb planted in the Rotunda and there's a bomb planted at the tax office in New Street.
21 people were killed that night in Birmingham.
They all pointed to the IRA.
And 220 injured.
It saved me. It's one of the lucky ones.
Some say this is the worst unsolved mass murder in modern British history.
Well, Paul Bridgewater lost his father, Paul Davies, in the bombings and joins us now alongside Ed Barlow, who is presenter of the Pub Bombings podcast on BBC Sounds. Paul, your dad died and you were born just a few months later. What impact did those bombings have on your mum's life and your childhood? What do you remember of that?
I mean, because my dad died 3 months before I was born, just growing up, like, just always, you know, your dad died in this atrocity. My mum, she was of a young age as well, you know, and she was heavily pregnant with me, so she's never really got over it. The thing is, you know, at the time, we always thought it was the Birmingham Six that did it. So when I was a kid growing up in school, it was, oh, your dad died in the Birmingham Pub Bombings, oh, it was the IRA. And then, you know, gradually as I got older, you know, I started getting a bit more interested in it. And then in '91, when the Birmingham Six got acquitted, it was just like, what's going to happen next? And there was nothing. It was like just a big void. As a kid, it's just like knowing that I didn't have my father there around. It just had a massive impact on my mum. She's never got over it, and it's nearly 50 years now.
And Ed, that's the issue, isn't it? Nearly 50 years, and we don't have any answers. We're no closer to really finding out exactly who did it. Why is now the time to make this podcast series?
Well, I think, as you say, 50 years is a significant milestone. We probably sometimes overdo anniversaries in the media, but this is such a significant one. And that's the fact that we do still have questions. For people like Paul and other family members of victims or people who survived the blasts and various other people, there are still so many questions that haven't quite been resolved. So it felt like the right time to start asking those questions again and to try and keep this case, this story, whatever you want to call it, in the public domain, really, and bring it to a new audience. It's a long time ago. People of a certain age haven't necessarily heard of it all.
And Paul, is that one of the reasons that you felt it was the right thing to talk about this now? And how important has that been for you? Because your story is part of the podcast.
It's huge because, like as Ed said, 50 years is a long time. And it's like keeping it relevant, you know, to a wider audience. Because I'm nearly 50. You know, a lot of people who were around at the time, they're all of an age where they'll remember it. But a lot of the younger audience don't remember it. My daughter's 25 now; she knows a lot about it. But it's getting that out there, keeping it relevant. Because there's loads of questions we need answering. Loads, you know, we've been campaigning for a long time with the Justice for the 21 group and with KRW, our legal team, to just basically try and get an inquiry.
You feel like there's a vacuum, don't you? You feel like everything's stopped.
Yeah, it is.
What do you need to happen?
We need a public inquiry because that's going to answer everything, basically. Yeah, as I said earlier, the Birmingham Six, they got acquitted of it, but then there was nothing. You know, it was a big void, a big gap. But that was 1991, and now we're here now, and there's still these questions haven't been answered.
And Ed, when you're piecing it together to make the series, did you get to a point where there are more questions than answers in all of this? Because you also learn a lot, don't you, when you're putting it together in this way? You go through it forensically to make this series. What did you learn? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a huge amount. You do enough to convince commissioners, I suppose, that there's a story to tell here, but as soon as you start speaking to somebody, they say you should speak to so-and-so, you should speak to so-and-so, you should read this, and the more you scratch the surface, the more you realise there are threads that haven't been quite tied up, or somebody else thinks something different. I think the biggest thing I've learned from this is that almost no two people think quite the same. Right. And one of the reasons for that is because there are so many questions that haven't been formally
answered. There's been challenges getting access to documents, both for me as a journalist, but for legal teams and so on. There's been a lot of debate whether documents have been locked away for 75 years or not. There's so many discrepancies. So that's what's been so fascinating to delve into from a journalistic point of view. And
all of these years on, it's still impacting families today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is one of the things we must never forget. You know, it's a powerful story, for want of a better word, but it's 21 people who lost their lives, 200 plus injured that night, and it's the families. And first and foremost, that's what's important to remember.
Paul, do you ever think you'll get closure, or you'll ever be able to sort of, you know, make your peace with this, about what happened to you and your dad and the family?
Well, I hope we do. You know, this is a journey I'll never give up, and none of the family members will ever give up. My daughter, like I said, she'll take that baton on from me, you know, when I can't do it. So, I mean, hopefully I do. I don't think it's a lot to ask. You know, it's 50 years and we still haven't got all the facts, you know. It's not a lot to us. There's plenty of inquiries that, you know, are happening, that have been given. Why can't we have one? 50 years.
Have you had any response when you're asking for a public inquiry?
We've had various meetings with various people from the Home Office, different Home Secretaries, but over the years they've all changed. You get to a point and then someone changes and then you're starting again, so it's like a stumbling block and then you're starting again. But at the moment we are in communication with the Home Office as well, so...
Best of luck with it.
Thank
nice
you
to see you
very
both. Thank you for coming in, to Ed and to Paul. All of the episodes of that series, it's called the Pub Bombings podcast. It's available to listen now on the BBC Sounds app.